Shabbat Shalom. This week, at the beginning of Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, we finally meet the hero of the Torah. We'll read about Moses every Shabbat for the rest of the year. Indeed known as Moshe Rabbeinu, he remains our teacher even today. His story resonates with all Jews for all time, and we search for new ways to apply the lessons of his life to our own. Exodus tells us that after Pharaoh issued an edict that all Jewish male babies must be killed, a couple from the tribe of Levi has a baby boy, Vatereo Toki Tovhu, and his mother, like all Jewish mothers since, she looked at the baby and thinks, this is very good work. The same language that's used in the creation story when God sees the divine work of creation, Kitov, for we are embarking on another creation here in Exodus, no less profound than creation itself. So to avoid his imminent death, because of the royal decree, she places baby Moses into an ark, a teva, an ark, the same word used in the Noah narrative about another creation story after the flood. And if I wanted to nerd out in front of you as a Hebrew Bible scholar, drawing biblical parallels between all of the previous creation narratives and this one, perhaps I'd suggest this morning that Moses' birth and the beginning in Exodus is the culmination of all previous creation narratives, but I'm not going to do that. Rather, I want to spend some time this morning focusing on the ark, this basket, this pod filled with the hope for humanity and justice, imbued with a sense of redemption and a restoration of goodness in the world. It floats down the Nile toward the epicenter of all of evil, the palace from which the decree of death emanated. And the pod floats into the possession of the very last person who we think should be trusted with the responsibility of caring for its contents, Pharaoh's daughter. She reaches out and she opens the basket. Vatereu et hayeled, v'hinei na'ar bocheh, v'tachmol alav v'tomer mi'aldei ha'ivrim zeh. She sees the boy and he's crying. And she took pity on him and she said, this must be a Jewish child. Our sages asked brilliant questions about these verses, but none more so than how did Pharaoh's daughter know that the baby was Jewish? Some commentators claim that when she opened the basket, she recognized the Shekhinah, a divine presence surrounding Moses' body. Some commentators think that she saw that the baby was circumcised, and it was such a rare ritual back then that the baby had to be Jewish. Others think that the Egyptian soldiers discarded so many Jewish babies into the waters of the Nile that unfortunately to find a baby floating in the water was not rare. To find a living baby in the water, that was miraculous. But the idea that's remained with us and visits us again and again and again through the generations, the explanation I'd like to examine this morning is presented by Chizkuni, a 13th century French rabbi, who cites a text from the Talmud, from Tractate Soda. He taught that Moses' mother had made a wedding canopy and placed it inside the basket to be with him because she worried that she might not be there or she might not even know him when the day comes and Moses was to one day get married. So the baby arrives in the basket wrapped in an identifying cloth that we know as a chuppah, and Pharaoh's daughter assumed was a Jewish blanket. So touching and profound is this midrashic explanation that in 1938, a Jewish boy from Ohio wrote a story about a baby whose parents fear imminent death and place the baby boy in a pod as the last hope for our humanity and our justice, as a cosmic sign of goodness, and he bears a secret identity. And the pod lands in the absolute last place we think deserving of such a boy, the most boring place in the entire world, Kansas. Except this time, the writer's name is Jerry Siegel. The publication is Action Comics #1, and the hero, the baby, is known as Superman. So touching and profound is the Talmudic idea of the canopy cloth that baby Clark Kent, or using his Hebrew name from Krypton, Kal-El, he's wrapped in the blanket of his family from Krypton, and the special fabric is sewn by his farmer mother into his super suit. So touching and profound is this idea that in 1956 it is permanently cemented into the text of Exodus. It appears in Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. In the film, the baby appears in the Nile wrapped in a distinctive blanket. Then years later, while searching for the truth, Moses, played by Charlton Heston, enters the hut of his biological family, finds his birth mother knitting the same distinctive design. And upon realizing that he's Jewish, Charlton Heston reaches out and holds the two cloths together, and he speaks the line of dialogue, "This is the binding tie." And therefore, the Agadic tale from Soda, the rabbinic explanation about the canopy, becomes affixed in our minds as part of the text. Although never specified in the Torah, it's clear that Moses was wrapped in an identifiable blanket, just as Superman and Charlton Heston after him. The idea that this midrash stuck with us, the reason that any story affixes itself to us, is because it resonates deep within our soul. We didn't realize that the text of the Torah was missing something, but after reconsidering, there's no way that we can read the text of the Torah without it. The Torah points to this missing detail, the reason for all of our rituals, all of our community, our peoplehood, is that for us, we're constantly looking for the binding tie. My children were born and wrapped in the blue and pink striped blankets of Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Yet I fully believe that they were born wrapped in the binding tie of my parents and my grandparents before them. And that binding tie stretched from Beverly Hills all the way back through Chicago to Eastern Europe, through the generations back to Eretz Yisrael. One of the great lessons we learned this week from Exodus is that if you mistakenly thought that our family in Genesis was connected only because they were so intimately related to one another as a nuclear family, then you're wrong. Exodus teaches us that we're connected to one another as a people, as a nation, as the largest family imaginable. Moses maintains this binding tie with his people even through separation for most of the first 2/3 of his life. And most Jewish life cycle events celebrate this concept of the binding tie. Every time we affix a new stitch for a loved one to strengthen the nature of the fabric, we celebrate. Whether it be a bris or a baby naming, a wedding or a bat mitzvah as we're celebrating today. So in both directions, Maya Grinberg is an additional stitch for our growing community, and this event celebrates Maya's acceptance of an unbreakable bond between herself and our tradition, our Torah. We can all relate to the story, to the connections. We celebrate today because the binding tie isn't a piece of cloth. It's bigger than that. A cloth can be torn and broken. We're connected through the non-corporeal, spiritual connections of the Jewish people across time and space. And at moments like this, we welcome new stakeholders, new members of the status of responsible adult. And like Moses and Superman before us, we turn to Maya. And we recognize that for you, you carry for us the greatest hope for humanity and justice and goodness. In each new Jewish adult, we see in them all of our past, all of our potential, and all of our promise for whom we were, whom we are, and whom we might one day become. Please open your Chumashim, your red books. Parshat Shemot begins on page 317.